To my dear colleagues and to our professor, Dr. Joselito de la Cruz, a pleasant and blessed day. I am Razel P. Galindon, the fourth presenter of Group 5. The topic assigned to our group is Model of Societies, and one of the subtopics is the human results of the Industrial Revolution, which I am going to discuss today. But before I discuss this topic, let us internalize first the transformation of the world. Try to imagine what your life would be like without any machines working for you. Make a list of the machines in your household and on your person. You may arrive at a surprising number. Now, imagine earlier generations during their childhood years. How did they move from place to place? How did they communicate? What foods did they eat? At one time, humans, fueled by the animals and plants they ate and the wood they burned, or aided by their domesticated animals, provided most of the energy in use. Windmills and water wheels captured some extra energy, but there was a little in reserve. All life operated within the fairly immediate flow of energy from the sun to earth. Everything changed during the Industrial Revolution, which began around 1750. People found an extra source of energy with an incredible capacity for work. That source was fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, though coal led the way, formed underground from the remains of plants and animals from much earlier geologic times. When these fuels were burned, they released energy originally from the sun that had been stored for hundreds of millions of years. As I said, I'm going to discuss today the human results, the negative and positive effects of the industrial revolutions. The Industrial Revolution was the transition from creating goods by hand to using machines. Its start and end are widely debated by scholars, but the period generally spanned from about 1760 to 1840. According to some, this turning point in history is responsible for an increase in population, an increase in the standard of living, and the emergence of the capitalist economy. The Industrial Revolution, which began roughly in the second half of the 1700s and stretched into the early 1800s, was a period of enormous change in Europe and America. The invention of new technologies, from mechanized looms for weaving cloth and the steam powered locomotive to improvements in iron smelting, transformed what had been largely rural societies of farmers and craftsmen who made goods by hand. Many people moved from the countryside into fast growing cities, where they worked in factories filled with machinery. While the Industrial Revolution created economic growth and offered new opportunities, that progress came with significant downsides, from damage to the environment and health and safety hazards to squalid living conditions for workers and their families. Historians say that many of these problems persisted and grew in the Second Industrial Revolution, another period of rapid change that began in the late 1800s. Let me now show you a few of the most significant negative effects of the Industrial Revolution. The first one is the horrible living conditions for workers. As cities grew during the Industrial Revolution, there wasn't enough housing for all new inhabitants who were jammed into squalid inner city neighborhoods. As more affluent residents fled to the suburbs. In the 1830s, Dr. William Henry Duncan, a government health official in Liverpool, England, surveyed living conditions and found that a third of the city's population live in cellars of houses, which had earthen floors and no ventilation or sanitation. As many as 16 people were living in a single room and sharing a single privy. The lack of clean water and gutters overflowing with sewage from basement cesspits made workers and their families vulnerable to infectious diseases such as cholera. Another negative effect is poor nutrition. In 1832, a study entitled Moral and Physical Condition of the Working Classes Employed in the Cotton Manufacture in Manchester, physician and social reformer James Phillips Kay described the meager diet of the British industrial cities' lowly paid laborers, who subsisted on a breakfast of tea or coffee with a little bread and a midday meal that typically consisted of boiled potatoes, melted lard and butter, sometimes with a few pieces of fried fatty bacon mixed in. After finishing work, laborers might have some more tea, often mingled with spirits and a little bread, or else oatmeal and potatoes again. As a result of malnutrition, Kay wrote, workers frequently suffered from problems with their stomachs and bowels, lost weight, and had skin that was pale, leaden colored, or to the yellow hue. Another negative effect is the stressful, unsatisfying lifestyle. Workers who came from the countryside to the cities had to adjust to a very different rhythm of existence with little personal autonomy. They had to arrive when the factory whistle blew or else face being locked out and losing their pay and even being forced to pay fines. Once on the job, they couldn't freely move around or catch a breather if they needed one, since that might necessitate shutting down a machine. Unlike craftsmen in rural towns, their days often consisted of having to perform repetitive tasks and continual pressure to keep up. Faster pace, more supervision, less pride, as Peter N. Stearns, a historian at George Mason University, explains. As describes in his 2013 book, The Industrial Revolution in World History, when the workday finally was done, they didn't have much time or energy left for any sort of recreation. To make matters worse, city officials often banned festivals and other activities that they'd once enjoyed in rural villages. Instead, workers often spent their leisure time at the neighborhood tavern, where alcohol provided an escape from the tedium of their lives. Another negative effect is the dangerous workplaces or having a dangerous workplaces. Without much in the way of safety regulations, factories of the Industrial Revolution could be horrifyingly hazardous. As Peter Capuano details in his 2015 book, Changing Hands, Industry Evolution, and the Reconfiguration of the Victorian Body, workers face the constant risk of losing a hand in the machinery. A contemporary newspaper account described the grisly injuries suffered in 1830 by mill worker Daniel Buckley, whose left hand was cut and lacerated and his fingers crushed. Before his co-workers could stop the equipment, he eventually died as a result of the trauma. Mines of the era which supplied the coal needed to keep steam-powered machines running had terrible accidents as well. David M. Turner's and Daniel Black's 2018 book, Disability in the Industrial Revolution, describes a gas explosion at a coal mine that left 36-year-old James Jackson with severe burns on his face, neck, chest, hands, and arms, as well as internal injuries. He was in such awful shape that he required opium to cope with the excruciating pain. After 6 weeks of recuperation, remarkably, a doctor decided that he was fit to return to work, but probably with permanent scars from the ordeal. Another negative effect of industrial revolution is the child labor. While children worked prior to industrial revolution, the rapid growth of factors created such a demand that poor youth and orphans were plucked from London's poorhouses and housed in meal dormitories while they worked long hours and were deprived of education. Compared to the dangerous adult jobs, children often suffered horrifying fates. John Brown's exposed a memoir of Robert Lincoln, an orphan boy, published in 1832, describes a 10-year-old girl named Mary Richards whose apron became caught in the machinery in a textile mill. In an instant, the poor girl was drawn by an irresistible force and dashed on the floor. Brown wrote, "She uttered the most heart-rending shrieks." University of Alberta history professor Beverly Limar sees the exploitation of child labor in a systematic and sustained way, the use of which catalyzed industrial production as the worst negative effect of the Industrial Revolution. Another negative effect is the discrimination against women. The Industrial Revolution helped establish patterns of gender inequality in the workplace that lasted in the eras that followed. Laura L. Frader, a retired professor of history at Northeastern University and author of The Industrial Revolution, A History in Documents, notes that factory owners often paid women only half of what men got for the same work, based on the false assumption that women didn't need to support families and were only working for pin money that a husband might give them to pay for non essential personal items. Discrimination against and stereotyping of women workers continued into the Second Industrial Revolution. The myth that women had nimble fingers and that they could withstand repetitive, mindless work better than men led to the displacement of men in white collar jobs, such as office work, and the assignment of such jobs to women after the 1870s when the typewriter was introduced. Fraser says, while office work was less dangerous and better paid, it locked women into yet another category of women's work from which it was hard to escape, Fraser explained. The last negative effect of industrial revolution that I'm going to share is the environmental harm. This photo shows the pollution from copper factories in Cornwall, England, as depicted in an 1887 engraving. The Industrial Revolution was powered by burning coal, and big industrial cities began pumping vast quantities of pollution into the atmosphere. London's concentration of suspended particulate matter rose dramatically between 1760 and 1830. As this chart from Our World in Data illustrates, pollution in Manchester was so awful that writer Hugh Miller noted the lurid gloom of the atmosphere that overhangs it, and describe the innumerable chimneys that come in view, tall and dim in the Dan haze, each bearing atop its own pennon of darkness. Air pollution continued to rise in 1800s, causing respiratory illness and higher death rates in areas that burned more coal. Worse yet, the burning of fossil fuel pumped carbon into the atmosphere. A study published in 2016 in Nature suggests that climate change driven by human activity began as early as the 1830s. Of course, if there are negative effects, there are also positive effects. So now, I'm going to present the benefits of industrialization. Many people around the world today enjoy the benefits of industrialization. With so much more energy flowing through human systems that even before, many of us must do much less hard physical labor than earlier generations did. People today are able to feed more babies and bring them to adulthood. Many people vote and participate in modern states which provide education, social security, and health benefits. Large numbers of people enjoy levels of wealth, health, education, travel, and life expectancy unimagined before industrialization. The benefits of industrialization, however, have come at great cost. For one thing, the rate of change, acceleration, is now so rapid that individuals and social systems struggle to keep up. And strong arguments can be made about the personalization in the age of mass production. The Industrial Revolution created an increase in employment opportunities. Wages at factories were higher than what individuals were making as farmers. As factories became widespread, additional managers and employees were required to operate them, increasing the supply of jobs and overall wages. Since most of the factories and large companies were located near the cities, populations migrated to urban areas searching for jobs, often overwhelming the available housing supply. So, this led to significant improvements in city planning. Increased innovation also led to higher levels of motivation and education, resulting in several groundbreaking inventions still used today. These inventions include a sewing machine, x ray, light bulb, calculator, and anesthesia. Due to the Industrial Revolution's advancement, the nation saw the first combustible engine, incandescent light bulb, and modern assembly line used in manufacturing. The industrial changed how people work, the technologies available to them, and often where they live. It made life comfortable for many, though living conditions for workers remained abhorrent, which eventually fueled the rise of labor unions that led to improved working conditions and fair wages. The increased complexity of the industrial has also brought increased fragility. Industrialization depends on the interaction of many diverse components, any one of which could fail. We know that many of the essential components of the industrial system and the natural resources it depends on are being compromised. The soil, the oceans, the atmosphere, the underground water levels, plants, and animals are all at risk. Will growth continue unchecked? Or are we approaching the end of the unsustainable industrial era? Whatever the future holds, we'll be debating and dealing with the consequences of modernization for years to come. Regardless of these questions, The Industrial Revolution had a transformative economic, social, and cultural impact and played an integral role in laying the foundations for modern society. To sum up my report, here are the key takeaways and important questions about Industrial Revolution. Key takeaways. The first Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain in the 1700s and 1800s and was a time of significant innovation. The American Industrial Revolution followed in the late 19th century and was engine of economic growth in the US. The Industrial Revolution led to inventions that included the assembly line, telegraph, steam engine, sewing machine, and internal combustion engine. Working for businesses during the Industrial Revolution paid better wages than agricultural work. The increase in the number of factories and migration to the cities led to pollution, deplorable working and living conditions, and child labor. Now, these are the important questions about this topic. First, what three things played a role in the Industrial Revolution? Technological changes, such as the use of iron and steel, new energy sources, such as coal and steam, and the factory system, led to a division of labor and a specialization, which increased efficiency work. What were the most important inventions of the Industrial Revolution? Among the most important inventions of the first industrial revolution include the steam engine, the spinning jenny, cotton gin, and the telegraph. This was followed by the second industrial revolution, which saw the advent of the internal combustion engine, controlled electricity, and the light bulb. How is the Industrial Revolution best defined? The Industrial Revolution shifted from an agrarian economy to a manufacturing economy where products were no longer made solely by hand, but by machines. This led to increased production and efficiency, lower prices, more goods, improved wages, and migration from rural areas to urban areas. So that ends my report, and these are the references I use to be able to share this topic. Salamat. Thank you for listening. Again, I am Rachel Pigalindon, a teacher 3 of Parañaque National High School, Maine.